The city of Memphis is sitting on a ticking time bomb, and it's not just the earthquake that will destroy it. But to understand why the city is doomed today, you have to go back to the winter of 1811 when the Mississippi River ran backwards, not as a metaphor, not as an exaggeration, literally in reverse. Eyewitnesses watched the current reverse direction. Islands disappeared. The riverbank collapsed in chunks the size of city blocks. New lakes appeared overnight in places that had been dry land the day before. Church bells rang on their own in Boston, 1,500 miles from where the ground had moved. That was the New Madrid earthquake sequence, and it is not finished. The United States Geological Survey has calculated that there is a 25 to 40% chance of a magnitude 6.0 or greater earthquake in this zone within the next 50 years. A 7 to 10% chance of something approaching what happened in 1811. Those numbers come directly from USGS. Published risk assessments. They are not contested. They are not fringe science. They are the federal government's own estimate of what is coming. But that is not the part that keeps the scientists up at night. Stay with me, because what I'm going to show you in the next few minutes is not about the earthquake itself. The earthquake is the opening act. What comes after it, in the first 20 minutes, in the first hour, in the first week, is the part that nobody in Memphis is being told about clearly enough. And it starts not with the shaking. It starts with what is underneath the city, right now, already there. Most people, when they think about earthquake danger in the United States, think about California. They think about the San Andreas Fault, that long visible scar in the landscape that runs down the western edge of the country. The thing you can see from a plane, the thing that appears on every geology textbook cover. The new Madrid Seismic Zone does not look like that. There is no visible fault line running through Memphis. There is no cracked ground, no ridge of displaced rock, no canyon carved by tectonic movement. The surface of the Mississippi Valley is flat, green, and completely ordinary. Farmland, highways, neighborhoods. The city of Memphis spread across it with no visible sign that anything unusual is happening underneath. That is because the fault is buried. Beneath Memphis, beneath the fields and the roads and the foundations of every building in the city. There are 100 to 200 feet of soft river sediment, alluvium, the accumulated deposits of the Mississippi, the Ohio, the White River, and their tributaries laid down over 60,000 years of flooding and retreat. The fault system runs through the rock below all of that, invisible at the surface, undetectable without seismographs. It does not announce itself. It does not creep in ways that GPS networks can easily measure. It holds, and holds, and holds. Yuncio Choi is a computational geodynamicist at the Center for Earthquake Research and Information at the University of Memphis. In a 2024 interview, she described the New Madrid Zone as, quote, one of the most enigmatic seismic zones on the planet. The reason is precisely this silence. In California, you can watch the ground move. Millimeter by millimeter, year by year, GPS networks track the accumulation of stress along the San Andreas. There is a visible, measurable signal that tells scientists how loaded the system is. In New Madrid, that signal is nearly absent. The crust is not moving at the surface in ways that tell you what is building beneath it. This is not reassuring. It is the opposite of reassuring. Because here is what the geological record shows. Over the past 4,500 years, this zone has produced multiple sequences of magnitude 7 to 8 earthquakes. The evidence is in the ground. Sand blows, craters formed when liquefied sediment erupted through the surface like geysers, preserved in layers that geologists have dated and mapped across 5 states. This fault has done what it did in 1811 before, multiple times, on a cycle that has nothing to do with whether we are watching it or not. I spent hours digging through buried FEMA planning scenarios and USGS assessments, and what I found is terrifying. They calculated that the zone carries a 7 to 10% chance of producing an earthquake comparable to the 1811 to 1812 sequence within the next 50 years. 7 to 10% does not sound alarming, but that is the same probability as rolling a 1 on a 10-sided die. And in this case, the die has been rolled continuously for the last 2 centuries. Here is the thing about the 1811 earthquake that most people do not know. The buildings that collapsed were not destroyed by the shaking directly. They were destroyed by what the shaking did to the ground beneath them. The technical term is liquefaction, and if you live anywhere near the Mississippi River Valley, it is the word you need to understand. This is how it works. The soil beneath Memphis and that 100 to 200 feet of river sediment is not solid rock. It is a mixture of sand, silt, and clay, saturated with groundwater. In its normal state, the grains of sand are pressed against each other, locked in place by friction and the weight of everything above them. The ground feels solid. It holds the weight of buildings and roads and bridges the way any foundation is supposed to. When seismic waves pass through saturated sandy sediment, they change the pressure in the water between those grains. The pressure spikes. The sand grains lose contact with each other. The friction that was holding everything together disappears in seconds. And the sediment stops behaving like a solid and starts behaving like a liquid. A house built on concrete pilings, a bridge with steel foundations, a hospital wing constructed to modern building codes. All of it sits on top of a material that for the duration of the earthquake and for minutes afterward is functionally a thick slurry. Structures do not just shake, they tilt, they sink, they are swallowed. The USGS and the Center for Earthquake Research and Information at the University of Memphis have both conducted detailed liquefaction hazard assessments for the city. The results show that the highest risk areas are precisely where you would expect the most people and the most infrastructure, along the banks of the Mississippi River through downtown Memphis, and along the Wolf River corridor that cuts through the heart of the city. Chris Kramer, a geophysicist at the Center for Earthquake Research and Information, has spent years modeling what a major New Madrid earthquake would do to Memphis specifically. The ground beneath the city, he has noted in published research, is almost ideally configured for liquefaction failure at scale. The soft sediment extends deep enough. The water table is high enough. The geography of the river valley concentrates the worst soil conditions directly beneath the densest population. This is not what happened in 1811 when New Madrid was a small settlement of a few hundred people. This is what would happen today in a city of over 600,000 people in the metropolitan area, built on the same sediment, in the same valley, above the same fault. And that is before we get to what happens above ground. In 1906, the San Francisco earthquake killed approximately 3,000 people. The earthquake itself caused relatively limited direct casualties. The fire that followed, the fire that burned for 4 days and destroyed most of the city, killed the majority of them, and the fire was unstoppable for one specific reason: the water mains had failed. Within minutes of the earthquake, hundreds of breaks had opened in the underground pipe network. Water pressure across the city dropped to 0. Fire crews arrived at hydrants and found nothing. The city burned not because there was no water, but because the infrastructure that was supposed to deliver it had been destroyed by the same event that started the fires. Memphis in 2025 is not San Francisco in 1906. But the water infrastructure equation is not fundamentally different. The city's water mains, many of them aging cast iron pipe, rigid and brittle, run through the same alluvial soil that liquefaction hazard assessments identify as high risk. When the ground beneath a rigid pipe shifts laterally or vertically, the pipe does not flex. It breaks, not in one place. in dozens of places simultaneously along every line that runs through the affected zone. A FEMA-funded catastrophic planning scenario for a major New Madrid earthquake, completed by a research team at the University of Illinois and Virginia Tech in 2009, projected that in the first hours after a magnitude 7.7 event, water service would be disrupted across wide portions of Memphis. Fire suppression capacity would be severely compromised. And the fire risk in an earthquake zone is not theoretical. Ruptured gas lines, downed electrical infrastructure, and overturned heating equipment all create ignition sources at exactly the moment when the systems designed to respond to them cannot function. But water is only part of the infrastructure failure. There are 15 major bridges crossing the Mississippi River and Ohio River in the region that would be rendered unusable or severely damaged by a major New Madrid earthquake, according to the same 2009 FEMA planning report. Memphis is not just a city, it is the central logistics hub of the central United States. The FedEx World Hub, the largest air freight hub on the planet, is located in Memphis. Oil and gas pipelines cross the river at multiple points through the region. Rail lines, highway arteries, all of them converge on the same river crossings that liquefaction and ground failure would compromise. The FEMA report projected that direct economic losses from a magnitude 7.7 New Madrid earthquake would reach $300 billion. That it would be, in their words, the highest economic losses due to a natural disaster in United States history. 7.2 million people displaced in the first 3 days. 130 hospitals damaged, most located in the highest impact counties near the fault. If you live in Memphis or anywhere nearby, drop a comment right now. Tell me what you know about this risk, what your neighbors are saying, what your local news is covering. Because this community is built on knowing what is actually happening at the local level. And your experience matters. Remember at the beginning when I said the thing nobody is telling Memphis clearly enough is not the earthquake. This is what I meant. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has known since at least 2008 what a major New Madrid earthquake would do to Memphis. The 2009 University of Illinois planning study, funded by FEMA, carried out by leading seismic engineers, spelled it out in precise technical language. The losses, the casualties, the infrastructure failure sequence, the projected number of people without water on day 1, day 3, day 7. That report exists. It is publicly available. It describes in detail the scenario that the earthquake creates. And then it describes the buildings. Memphis has more than 25,000 unreinforced masonry buildings currently in use. Brick construction, load-bearing brick walls without internal steel reinforcement. Without the systems that help a structure flex and absorb lateral seismic energy rather than crack and collapse outright. Schools built before seismic codes existed. Fire stations, police precincts. The facilities that are supposed to coordinate emergency response when the earthquake happens are built from the same material that is most likely to fail when the shaking starts. The city has a voluntary retrofit program. Compliance, as of recent estimates, sits at approximately 5%. Here is the part that makes this different from every other natural disaster risk story you have seen. In California, the threat of the San Andreas is not a secret. Seismic building codes in California have been continuously updated since the 1970s. Structures are engineered to bend without breaking. Hospitals and schools are held to the highest standards. The state has invested billions in retrofit programs because the political consensus long ago accepted that the earthquake is not hypothetical. Tennessee allows individual jurisdictions to decide whether to adopt seismic building provisions at all. Missouri does not have a statewide building code with mandatory seismic requirements. These are not obscure policy footnotes. They are the reason that, in Memphis, the building where your grandchildren go to school may have been constructed. under codes designed to handle wind loads and snow loads, with no meaningful provision for the lateral seismic force that a New Madrid earthquake would produce. Chris Kramer put it directly in published research. Human bodies do not stand up well to falling building parts. The USGS risk assessment has not changed. The geological record of repeated major earthquakes in this zone has not changed. The soil conditions beneath Memphis have not changed. What has changed is the population density, from a few hundred people in 1811 to over 1 million in the metropolitan area today, and the accumulated infrastructure debt of a city that has been operating for 2 centuries on the assumption that what happened in 1811 was a historical curiosity rather than a preview. The fault does not care about the assumption. Scientists cannot tell you when the next New Madrid sequence will begin. That is not what they are saying. What they are saying in USGS publications, in FEMA planning, documents in peer-reviewed journals, in congressional testimony, is that the probability is real, the hazard is verified, and the gap between what Memphis could withstand and what the earthquake would demand is wider than almost any comparable urban area in the country. The Mississippi River ran backwards in 1811. The bells rang in Boston. The lakes appeared overnight. The fault that did that has not moved since. It is still there. It is still loaded. And the city of 600,000 people built on top of it is operating mostly as though the 1811 event was a story from another era, rather than a geological clock that has been running continuously for 200 years. The most dangerous thing about the New Madrid fault is not the magnitude. It is the silence, and how easily silence gets mistaken for safety.